having moved around so much for so long. For a long time. And now by 2017. Where you are now. Yeah, we're in
Want the basket too? Get the whole schmeal. That's not very many.
There's something at the library. Okay. I know. Dang.
Call a meeting to order. Special select board
Recording in progress.
Special select board meeting on Tuesday, March 21st is called to order. And the first item is approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
And seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed. Next, approval of consent agenda.
So moved. Second. No, sorry, no.
Is there anything anybody would like to point out in the consent agenda? I saw some discussion, I guess one of the liquor licenses wasn't ready yet, okay. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye. Aye, those opposed. Okay, citizen comments, is there anyone here for something that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, we're gonna move right on to.
Oh, Judy's hand just went up.
Judy stands up.
Hi, Judy.
Sorry, my earbuds are falling out. So can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. I just want to let you know on behalf of the Middlebury Tree Committee that we have been notified that we have received Tree City USA recertification, which makes us a Tree City USA for 5 years running. We also received an Arbor Day Foundation Growth Award as a result of, and here's where I really want to thank you all, a budget increase. The fact that using that budget increase and a grant application, we were able to hire a part-time intern to do work at DPW or with DPW for our tree inventory to better utilize that information to determine new planting sites, which we are working closely with Emily Sherrington to determine. And lastly, if you would save the date, Saturday, May 6th, for the town's Arbor Day celebration, which we actually are doing in conjunction with the co-op, the library, and Sparrow Art Supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, appreciate the work that you and the rest of the tree committee have been doing. So, any other hands up? Okay, then we're gonna move on to item number 5.
We have Betsy just raised her hand.
Okay,
Evening. My name is Betsy Schwenker, and I am a resident of the Tell Hill Townhomes that sits across the street from the Stonecrop Meadows development. If it is not appropriate for me to raise a couple of questions at this meeting, I will wait until the public hearing in April.
I think the public hearing is probably the best time because all the players will be there if it's in regards to that development. We're quite a ways from breaking ground there and that would seem to be collaborate everybody together and raise all the issues at one time. If you don't mind.
That is April 4th?
That is going to be the select board's hearing on the grant application, not on the project itself, the grant application for Vermont Community Development Program funding. the Planning and Zoning Department are holding a series of DRB meetings on the development. If you'd like, I could get you the dates of the next one.
Okay, that would be helpful. I did address a letter to the Development Review Board via email this past week, in which I stated a couple of our concerns, but I had not heard back. So I just thought I would appear this evening, but I won't take up any more of your time. If you could get me that next meeting, that would be helpful.
But we'll do, Betsy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. Then we'll move on to approval of the Vermont Community Development Program grant agreement for the Lindale Park community septic system. This is a long time in the offing. The town of Middlebury has been awarded $450,000 in grant funding from the Vermont Community Development Program for construction of a community septic system at the Lindale Mobile Home Park. As only municipalities are eligible for funding from VCDP, the town will serve as a pass-through and sub-grant the funding to the Addison County Community Trust for the project. As for this and several other projects in support of affordable housing. The sources and uses of the funding for the project are outlined in the grant agreement. And if anybody has any questions on them, they're in our packet as well. Has everybody looked at that? Are there any questions on it?
And we have Elise from the Addison County Community Trust is with us. We're having an issue with the mirroring of the screens, but she is a full panelist. If you have any questions for her, or if Elise, if you have anything to add.
Nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions. You did mention it's a long time coming, and that's true, but we have signed a construction contract. So I think we are finally in the home stretch here. Thanks for all of those years of support.
You're welcome.
It's a pretty expensive septic tank.
I'll move to approve the proposed grant agreement resolution from Vermont Community Development Program associated with the planned capital improvement for Lindale Mobile Home Parks wastewater project.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, now I'm going to invite Rob Lucchini and Paul McDonald forward to, they're going to present to us representatives from Agency of Transportation, the project manager. And I asked them to come and present the findings of the master plan, and have a chance for all of us to see it together and discuss before any final comments for the Act 250 review are due from us on Black Friday. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
So again, my name is Robert Lucchini. I'm the consultant project manager for the master plan project with VTrans. I'm taking over from the previous project manager who's no longer with the department.
Paul McDonald. I'm a consultant for VTrans and hired to do the master plan on behalf of the state.
Want to start?
Sure. I'm going to present on our draft master plan, which is in the final process right now. Rob's going to talk more about the separate Act 250 program for the hangar projects. They're two separate things, even though they're occurring at the same time. My presentation, we've given that to the public already a couple times in this room, never to officially the select board at this point. Kathleen, did you want to advance my say
I am having some difficulty bringing that up on my screen. I see that it's here. I don't know what's going on with the splitter. I guess we're all connected. Yeah, but that's what's happening.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Don't know what to tell you.
Is the whiz kid's gonna go over?
Oh, good. We have our technical person here. So, I share screen. Highlighted this.
And you don't have any left.
I was like, why is it so tiny? It's just- Okay,
You can just
I'll
forward
just
back
watch
with
that.
that.
Okay.
Because we did it last week.
right.
Okay, so I'll just run through it. I'll say next. The purpose of this meeting, has already been expressed that we were invited here to present on the master plan process. First slide is just saying that we have had a bunch of public outreach already, started from early in the process. We had 2 public meetings. We had 3 technical advisory committees meetings. That was a special committee just to help advise and give us input and give us criticisms and other recommendations. This is the first and only select board meeting, and we've also had this comments and response process. The draft master plan is online on VTran's website. It's also on the town website, and all the comments that were received prior to the draft report being released are already published. The final report will publish all the final comments that we received. Okay, next. Thank you. What is a master plan? It's a long-term study. It guides the short and long-term recommendations, improvements at an airport. It is, you can think of it as a master plan that you might have for an industrial park or a college campus. This one's for the airport. In our case, there's 2 parts. There's a report that's available online, and then there's a set of technical documents that go with it, a set of drawings that go with it that FAA uses, and they review and approve the airport layout plan. One thing we definitely wanted to highlight, and we've highlighted this in the past, is that the master plan does not include any project approvals or environmental approvals. It's a prerequisite. It's an additional requirement. It doesn't bypass any of the other permitting needs. And if you didn't think it was a good idea, just from a planning standpoint, FAA requires it. So we have to do it for all the state airports, and every airport in the country that gets FAA funds has to do a regular master plan. Next. We're at the end. This is our little flow chart schedule. You can see we're finalizing the documents for plan adoption now. And the next slides go over what's in the plan. So next. Okay, a little background on the airport. Many people may not even know the details of the airport. It's just a 1-runway airport. The airport owns about 150 acres. That one runway is 3,200 feet in length. Many of you know it was extended a couple of years back from 2,500. It does have a full parallel taxiway. It has a weather station. It has security fencing. It does not have any lighting for nighttime use. So that's the basics of the airfield. I think it's the 2nd smallest airport, publicly owned airport in Vermont.
Can you repeat what you just said about the lighting?
The airport runway at one
runway,
point did have lights that so the runway could be used when it's dark out. It cannot be done right now. There are no lights on the airfield. So when we're after dusk, the runway is closed. Next, please. Some of the landside facilities, the terminal facilities, are 13 hangars there. There's plenty of places for aircraft to park outside. We call those tie downs. One of the biggest location on is this large tie down apron, which is in the upper right. There's also aviation fuel. There's a garage for the snow plows. There's a sand shed, and there's parking, and there's roadway access. There are 30 based aircraft at the airport. That changes periodically up and down. There's some seasonal aircraft as well. And there's 2 business tenants at the airport. So this is a small airport in terms of size of the airfield, in terms of size of the activity, the number of based aircraft, and pretty much within all respects. It's a small airport. Next. We did a forecast as part of the master plan. It's a required step. We're showing our estimated estimated activity of about 6,000 annual takeoffs and landings. Every landing, every takeoff, every low pass, if you added them all up, our estimate is 6,000 for the whole year. We don't know that number exactly. There is no air traffic control tower. 90% of the airports in the US don't have air traffic control towers and count the activity. Middlebury is one of those 90%. So 6,000 a year, that's an estimate we've made. FAA has accepted that as an estimate. And during the process, we came under a bunch of criticism that that number is too high. It's less than that in reality. That's a fair criticism. It may be less than that. And we don't have the proof or the documentation. But the master plan itself, how does it use that number? It uses it to see if more airfield facilities are necessary to accommodate the activity. We also did a projection showing some growth. So you can criticize that as well. We don't know if that will grow in that manner, more or less, but we do know the conclusion. And with that existing level and with any of that growth, if all of that growth were to happen, the master plan concludes that no additional airfield facilities are necessary. No new runways, no extensions, no new taxiways. It's good. It's good for what you have.
And that's through the 2041.
Throughout the 20-year planning period, and 20 years from now, I'm guessing the conclusion would be the same. From an based aircraft standpoint, we also forecast the potential for growth in based aircraft. Now, VTrans and the town of Middlebury doesn't control the based aircraft that are there. The owners do. And unlike runways, VTrans does not build hangars. Though they lease space, and private entities, someone like me, could come in and build an aircraft hangar if I went through the process and had the money to do so. So we are forecasting the potential increase, but it's really going to be market driven. So I put that out there that we don't know if people are going to come in, are going to be able to afford to build hangars and make that happen. But we didn't want to underplan. We wanted to see if there was some growth over 20 years, could it be accommodated and how? We did incorporate that into the master. Next. The critical aircraft, that's an FAA term, and that refers to the largest regular user of the airport. We call that the critical aircraft. In this case, it's a light aircraft. It's single engine and light twin engine aircraft that use the airport on a regular basis. FAA defines that regular term as well, 500 annual operations, which is about one landing per business day. That'd be about 500. The master plan, based on the forecast and what we foresee for the airport, we don't project or foresee any need to change that over the 20-year planning period. We think the airport, the largest users are going to stay the same largest users throughout the future. The picture is just a sample of a Cessna, twin Cessna. We don't have a specific critical aircraft. It's a group or a size of aircraft. Next. This is some more pictures. FAA gets pretty technical in their classifications. The critical aircraft with that twin Cessna, that comes under Airport Reference Code B1. And you can see the definition of that. The airport users are mostly A1, mostly the light single engine aircraft by a long shot. Twins do come in regularly, and on occasion, you'll see a larger aircraft there. There's nothing stopping a larger aircraft, a business aircraft, or even a light corporate jet have come there in the past. But we are not forecasting that ever to become the critical aircraft or a regular user at Middlebury. There are other airports for those types of airplanes. They can go to Burlington, they can go to Rutland, they can go to Berlin, Middlebury. Our whole master plan is going to stay as a small airport.
Sorry to interrupt you again. So you know what the primary aircraft are, but you don't know how many.
We don't have an official count.
Okay, I'm just curious how you know that this is the main aircraft that we see if you don't know about the landings and takeoffs.
We know that from the operators of the airport. from the based aircraft that are there and from the daily user who is an ad hoc airport manager and the maintenance provider that's there.
Thanks.
Do you have any guess on those corporate jets? How many do they have?
A couple a year, maybe,
A couple of years.
yeah, a few a year. There's that, I'm not even showing a corporate jet here. The one that's under the A2 category, the Pilatus PC-12, that you see more regularly in throughout Vermont. There's a bunch of them based at Burlington. Even at Morrisville Stowe Airport, there was a period of time where they had scheduled service by that type of aircraft. People were coming in on Fridays, leaving on Sundays to go to the ski resort. And it's a common aircraft used for charter service. So if you were to be able to charter an aircraft in Middlebury, it might be one of those, or small. Okay, next. Runway taxi requirements kind of highlighted on this. No expansion required or recommended in the master plan. Next. Now, what are the recommendations? There are a few. This gets a little complex in that the instrument approaches or instrument flight procedures. Right now, to take off and land at Middlebury, it's all visual. You're seeing and you're flying. When the weather is bad, when there's low clouds or poor visibility, you really can't operate at Middlebury Airport because there's no instrument of procedure. If there was a procedure, you'd still need pretty good weather. FAA is never going to publish a procedure where you can fly in with no visibility into Middlebury because of the terrain surrounding the airport. But instead of having to have clouds above 3,000 feet, maybe there's a procedure that FAA will publish that you could get down to half that, 1,500 feet. We don't know that yet. But the master plan is recommending to the FAA that instrument procedures to operate at the airport when the weather visibility is lower be considered. And as part of the master plan, we did the survey that FAA would need to publish an instrument procedure. I think of the 9 paved, I'm almost positive of this, the 9 paved airports operated by the state, plus the 10th, Burlington, all of them have these instrument of procedures, except for Middlebury. So this is a recommendation that the master plan is carrying forward. When the master plan is done, VTrans can ask the FAA to proceed with that effort, and only FAA could tell us what those procedures might be. They have to do the analysis, but we provided the data to them. To do these procedures, you don't need any facilities on the ground. It's all GPS based. Okay, next. This is a visual aid called PAPI, Precision Approach Path Indicator. This is a visual aid that pilots use to help them fly the appropriate slope to the ends of the runway. Not every airport has them, but most have them. It uses a light that if you're too high, the light show is white. When you're too low, the white show is red. And when you're on that perfect slope, you'll have one red and one white light. And that's why it's a visual aid. It looks like a traffic light if you were standing next to it, except it's horizontal instead of vertical. That's a picture of one. There's a tiny dot there on the left. That's from Morrisville Stowe. Go ahead to the next slide, and we'll zoom in on that a little bit. This is still Morrisville Stowe, a photo about 150 feet away from the PAPI units. There's 2 boxes. The photo was taken on the ground, so it's appropriate that the lights you see are red. You would be too low if you were in a plane. So we are recommending that for both ends of the runway. If it is installed, you'd be able to go and see that. You can see it from a distance. We were trying to see, could you see it from one of the local roads if you put these in? And I think if you were on Munson Road, even though you're about 2,000 feet away, if you look south on Munson Road towards the runway, you'd be able to see 2 red lights just like this, except you'd be 2,000 feet away instead of 100 or 200 feet away. So that's what a PAPI is. It's a visual aid. It would be off at night, just like a traffic light. You use it all the time, but this would be turned off at night because the airport's not opened at night. So that is a recommendation. What the benefit of these precision approach slope indicators are is runways have all different widths. Burlington's runway width is 150 feet wide. You go down to Rutland, it's 100 feet wide. You go to Morrisville Stowe, it's 75 feet wide, and you go to Middlebury, it's 60 feet wide. That's the narrowest runway of FAA standards. And if you just flew to Burlington and then you're flying to Middlebury, since that runway is so narrow, it looks like it's further away. You think you may be higher up. And that PAPI really helps you just narrow in that slope for consistent approach paths into the runway. Next. Hangars. The hangars are full at the airport. I did mention there's 30 hangars there. Again, VTrans, FAA, the town of Middlebury, no one's going to build those. Only individuals build them with a lease agreement. But since they are at full capacity and there has been expressed interest, we're forecasting growth and a need for additional hangars. So that it's easy to say there's a need and we're forecasting growth, but it's still market driven. We are not going to build those hangars, but the master plan clearly indicates we foresee the need for them and we think the airport should plan for them. In terms of outdoor storage, parking apron, there's plenty at the airport now. There's surplus space now. Next. There is no terminal building. The photo here, I keep going back to Morrisville Stowe, because they also, in addition to having PAPIs, they have a little terminal building. That's the photo of that. Right now, if you're a visiting pilot or a local pilot, you can use the little office area owned by the maintenance company that's there. But it's not owned by VTrans. It's not leased by them. And so we are recommending a small terminal building. This would be about pretty much like Morrisville Stowe, about 1,500 square foot of a terminal building. And it would have a place for flight planning and a waiting area and a lounge, restrooms, good to have at an airport, and a terminal so you could do your flight planning online. So that is a recommendation in the master plan. Next, please. This is on the right is a floor plan for a little terminal building that VTrans is working on for Northeast Kingdom Regional Airport up in Newport. They were able to get some funding through the Northern Borders federal program to go after a small public terminal building there. That program is not eligible in this county, but it doesn't mean we didn't recommend it as in a future project. Next. Okay, here's a summary. Not a whole lot in here for the airfield. We're recommending the instrument approaches, the PAPIs. The tree removal is an ongoing project. I know that's run into some environmental issues, but I like to say for airports, we only want to remove the trees that are at the ends of the runway, and that won't go away for Middlebury. You know, the trees grow. They should be maintained over time, but there always may be some tree removal recommended. Moving to the land side, I mentioned the GA terminal building. Oh, I didn't mention additional vehicle parking. There's only about 10 spots there in the airport. They need some additional parking spaces. And we recommended the additional hangars as well. So that's a summary. If you go to the next slide, this is an illustration of that plan. And on the airfield, it doesn't really look very different. You can see we just have some labels of the facilities to provide. There's nothing new at the airfield. We do show blue is extra pavement, and the very light blue are potential hangars, potential privately owned hangars. The ones to the left, which is the north, those are the ones that are subject of the state master hangar permitting effort. Okay.
The pre-permitted ones are the ones that are going in now.
No.
There's two pictures with
What he's saying is that the northern, on the left of the screen is the northern part of the airport.
Southern ones, they see how they have the tag.
The pre-permitted ones are from private hangar developers.
The one labeled pre-permitted is something that where a developer, not the state, has pursued the permit process themselves. And I don't know the actual state, and there's nothing under construction right now.
Has it gone through the Act 250?
No.
Has it gone through the town?
It hasn't, the act, it go through the town is through the Act 250. I mean, they're one of the same in this case because it's state property as opposed to a development on private property.
So when you say permitted, what permits do they have currently?
An operational stormwater permit.
Say it again.
An operational stormwater permit. I can get into that in a second here. Why don't we finish, I guess, what you were,
Yeah, I think I'm
okay.
almost done here. Next slide. Yeah, this is my last slide. So where are we? The draft report was released late last year. We had the final public meeting late last year. That draft report is still available for review. We've collected the comments through January, and we're preparing our responses and the final report. So that's what's going on now. We suspect the final report will be released next month. It's got to go through the VTrans process. It could be some delays on that. And then FAA approval. We would expect FAA to approve this plan as written. Could be this spring. And last but not least, I said it already, the master plan does not give you any approvals for development. It's an additional requirement you have to go through first. So to build a hangar and to improve the fuel farm or put in the PAPIs, the FAA wants to see them included in the master plan. So we've done just that first part. So that's it for the master plan.
All right. Could we go back to the figure that showed some of the hangars? Go back a few slides. Right here. Okay, so let's talk about some of the hangars being proposed on the airport. I know they are a thing of contention, and I think there's some misunderstandings here. So when you see the figure, there's sort of the northern development, the southern development, and we'll just call it some of the western development. And independent of this process of the master plan update, and independent of the Act 250 or the permitting, the pre-permitting that people have been talking about, we have some hangar developers that are seeking to develop at the airport. Now, they're not these individuals, they don't want to wait for the assistance from the state in their pre-permitting effort. I'll get into that in a minute. So the southern location is an example of a private entity who wants to develop at the airport. And now they're going through a separate independent process to do so. But just to rewind here and I guess start. So in 2019, the state legislation passed a bill called S-162. This was to promote economic development at state-owned airports. In compliance with this legislative initiative, VTrans began a statewide permitting effort. Now, what VTrans did is they looked at all the airports that had paved runways and said, we are going to find partial findings in Act 250 to meet what was required from that legislation. And so if I could simplify that a little bit, it was so difficult for developers to develop in Vermont that there was a need for assistance to do some of the permitting ahead of time, to allow a developer that wants to develop somewhere to be able to use some of the pre-permitted effort so that they could start working on their own development for their own company or their own private hangar development. So the northern hangars, the hangar developments shown there, in that location is from that effort. Now that effort was prior to the master plan update. So VTrans had looked at that area, had proposed in that effort this layout, and had gone through the steps for partial findings, not for construction. Let me talk about this whole process a little bit. So if a developer wanted to develop at an airport, they would approach VTrans and they would say, I want to do this development. VTrans would review it. And there'd be several different things that would take place. So the first step is there'd be a Section 163 review. FAA would look at this. They would have making sure that we're meeting all sorts of FAA requirements on the airfield for safety for that hangar development. Once that is completed, the airport layout plans, which we have shown you, the document produced from the master plan, would be updated. It happens at many airports after master plans that hangars get developed that aren't on an ALP, airport layout plan, that need to get on the airport layout plan. And so they get added. And there's a review process for that with the FAA. Once they're added, and they have to go through the next step, which is the federal environmental level. And the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, has a set of regulations that then a hangar developer would have to meet and satisfy for their development. After or concurrently, there's also the state level of Act 250. In addition to that, there are all of the Agency of Natural Resources permitting, which include things for like stormwater, or depending on the nature of the project, things like, for example, a Department of Fire Safety, where they would get into storage of flammable liquids, for example, with a tank permit. So there's a degree of permitting that's needed at that stage. And in addition to that, there's the Act 250 process, which requires all of the state permits to be in place before they issue their permit for Act 250. Now, once that gets completed, if completed, then it would go into development. At that time, the hangar developer would pay for their own money to construct this building, this hangar, whatever infrastructure needed. They would enter into a lease agreement. That lease agreement would then, there are federal requirements for a lease agreement, and some of them include, sunsetting. So the ownership of that hangar would then turn to the state in 20 years down the road. But these lease agreements are essentially a revenue generation method. So it's generating revenue for the airport. And what they're doing is they're leasing the area that they just paid money to develop. Seems crazy, right? But this process is helpful for folks looking to extend the longevity of their aircraft, or potentially for a business enterprise. And it's important, I think, to just state that process so folks are aware of all of the environmental steps. And from a master plan's perspective, which is before that, where it doesn't get into the specifics of those environmental policies yet, because that's not the process. So the northern hangars, that development, that area, which has been shown on previous airport layout plans. I have an older one, 20 years ago, that shows hangar development in this area. Now, it's not exactly the same hangar development, a different configuration. Now, the pre-permitting, we'll talk about what the name of this is. So it's a statewide master permitting effort. So the statewide master permitting effort, which is looking for partial findings for Act 250, propose a layout on the airport layout plan. We are showing that on our master plan, but the master plan is not dictating to that separate effort which has existed beforehand. Now, that process, just to reiterate, an application went in April 19th of 2021. There was some revisions. In June 3rd of 2022, Act 250 accepted that application. There was a public hearing in August 19th of 2022. No changes have been made to these pre-permitted, the statewide master permitting effort for these northern locations. No changes have been made to that area. So what was proposed in that application and what was talked about at the public hearing is exactly what's shown here today and is in an effort to meet the requirements of the bill S-162. So VTrans is compelled to then do this at all their airports, and they are. And this just happens to be the one for Middlebury. And it's a very similar situation where there are some larger hangars and some smaller hangars and some mid-size hangars. And if a hangar developer at some point down the road wished to develop in that location, they could even propose something different than what we show here today, because we have no idea what a hangar developer would want. We are just guessing. We are providing some options. Now, that hangar developer will have to go through the process of Act 250, the process of NEPA. They would have to go through the process of all the permits that are required for that prior to being able to do any sort of development. Now, the airport, they receive 90% of their money for projects by the federal government. In other words, when we do a project, any project, like the extension of the runway or taxiway work on the airfield or the PAPIs that were proposed, 90% of those funds come from the federal government. 10% come from the state and local share, which happen to be one and the same. And so that's a VTrans bill, 10% of that. Now, each one of those projects that have been going on at the airport come with what's called grant assurances. And it's FAA's way of assuring that with this money that you are acting in accordance with what they would expect from this at the airport. Now, one of the things that they want is for revenue generation. They don't want you not to make money at your airport. And hangar development is a great way for revenue generation, as I previously explained. So VTrans is compelled by these grant assurances to propose hangar developments at this airport. It's a great way from the airport's or from FAA's perspective in encouraging use of this airport and aviation use, that is, and is a part of the grant insurances. So, with that being said, we also, like I said previously, I'd mentioned there was some private development interest. So folks who didn't want to wait for the state for help, they said, I want to develop sooner than later, and that's shown here. And they're working through their process. Now they're going through Act 250. They're going through the permits that they need for that work, and we will work with them for that effort. But it's a lengthy effort because there's plenty to do there. But it goes to show you that there is a need for these hangars, like we suggested earlier. I know that there's folks who aren't interested in some of these hangars, but like I said earlier, we are also responsible to meet what was proposed in Bill 162. And so this is our compliancy to that. Now, if you would like, we could go through some of the questions and comments that the select board had provided for the master plan. And we can kind of explain some of that response.
We could do that, and then I'd like to give the select board an opportunity to question before we open it up to the floor. So since we have given you some specific concerns, if you could share your position on those concerns or what's been taken into account first. I think that would the board has got the benefit of that as well.
You want to start?
Just go in order.
Yeah, we'll just go in order.
One of the, I like the first comment the board had is it's about the board's concern for environmental protection of resources, including the water source protection area and emergency spill protocols or anything else that's applicable. I like that question from the master plan standpoint because it gets me to say that what I've said already is V-Trans agrees with that, and all this planning doesn't bypass any of that. It's all still required. V-Trans, however, doesn't establish the rules for environmental protection. It follows the rules established by the federal and state agencies. And in Vermont, the most significant state agency is Vermont A&R, who is responsible for going through all the water quality work that would need to be done for any development, hangar or otherwise, with operational stormwater permits and construction stormwater permits. If there were to be any sewer or wells or septic systems, the permits for those systems as well. From a fuel system standpoint, meeting all the required federal and state requirements for fuel safety and storage and registering that information. So just because it's a state airport and the traditional site plan permitting process isn't there at the municipal level, all the state permits which protect the environment are still there. And so is the Act 250 program. So V-Trans, yes is our answer. None of that's going to be tried to be bypassed because of the state regulation 2019 or from the master plan process.
So another comment that we received talks about the consideration of placement of the structures on the viewscape of the neighbors. Or also, there's another version of that where I think it says location of airport hangar buildings envelops to minimize impact to airport neighbors and specifically to arrange the largest hangar such that it does not shadow the airport's closest neighbor if possible. And so to that, I think I explained a little bit of why we got here and Bill 162. And I explained that these hangars, we are compelled, V-Trans is compelled to meet grant assurances for revenue generation, and hangars are a great use for that. And we're already doing so. In previous 20-year-old master plans, airport layout plans, development is shown just as we show it here today with a slightly different configuration. That is our priority. And we have spent an enormous amount of effort to get to that over the past few years, meeting the statewide permitting effort. And there isn't the opportunity at this point at the end to change that configuration, because that configuration and that location and those hangars are required by state legislation for us to pre-permit. Might never be constructed, perhaps. I mean, look, some of these might never get constructed. Maybe a hangar developer doesn't want that area. But V-Trans isn't going to pay for it, but we have to show something, and we have to provide the pre-permitting effort for it. And so that's where we stand with those hangar locations.
From a master planning standpoint, the hangar shown on the figure there on the south end of the runway, or the right side of the runway there, that is a big hangar. But what it really is picture like a 3-car garage. It's a bunch of small hangars that are connected. And there'll be separate doors. There won't be one giant hangar door. There'll be a number of small hangar doors for individual aircraft. Sometimes they call it a rectangular hangar. Sometimes they call it a one-sided T hangar. But the market for aircraft at this airport are mostly the smaller aircraft. So it's not surprising me that private individual is looking to build one structure that can house a bunch of small airplanes. So it wasn't surprising to me. Most of the hangars at the airport are small individual aircraft hangars for 1 or 2 airplanes. Not as efficient to build that way because you need 4 walls and a roof for each small hangar. But in the state program, statewide, the program was set up to accommodate both small and large aircraft hangars. And the small hangars that you see on this map are almost positive they're 60 by 60 or 60 by 80, those are small hangars. And the one large one you see there on the very north, that's 120 by 120. So a much larger hangar. That could be a type of hangar that could support larger aircraft. I'd be surprised if that one is built because it's all market driven. But there's not of the existing terminal building is at Morrisville Stowe. It's been around
Okay.
forever. Right now, VTrans is designing and permitting a new terminal building of about 1,500 square feet in Newport.
Oh, okay.
at Northeast Kingdom Regional.
So that site plan that you showed in the slide was for the Newport proposal.
Just a concept.
Building, that picture you showed was what's existing in Morrisville.
Exactly.
Okay,
And I've
thank
already, I know our designers told me that, yeah, they've already changed the floor plan from what I showed.
okay. I was more, not the specifics, more just the size was what I was
Yeah,
trying to get.
1,400, 1,500. 1,500 is a good number. It could be smaller than that, but yeah, it's not going to be a substantial building.
The other question I have is about the hangars. So like when we do our own town plan, we propose certain things in that town plan, but it's really like a guidance document, right? Like it's, you know, like what we might like if we could have everything we wanted type thing. So if someone is interested in building a hangar and they're interested in that northern area, they could propose something completely different than what is shown in any of the plans
Yeah, like,
based on what they want and are willing to fund and what they need or have money for, correct?
Mhm.
And even though it may be shown, drawn this way or that way, somebody could come in and propose something that's 300 by 300, right?
well, that would negate any sort of effort that was done to help them for their permitting effort.
But they could do it.
It would have to go through the whole process.
It would have
over-
to go,
Correct,
right.
correct,
It
yes.
would have to go through the
Yep.
whole process, but somebody could come in and propose something that's completely different than what's proposed.
Right, and just because they propose it doesn't necessarily
And
mean.
it doesn't mean it's
right.
going to go through.
Or, yeah, it could get stopped by Act 250 or stopped by VTrans or stopped by the permitting or stopped
Right.
by.
So I guess I just want to clear up the fact that somebody could come in and propose something completely different and we don't have any control over what somebody requests that they do there. Whether
Right.
they get to do it or not is a
Exactly.
different story, but the design, this pre-permitting doesn't necessarily mean that that's what has to be done
Exactly.
at some point in the future. Somebody could propose something completely different. Okay.
And the design that is being done as part of the permitting is a lot, mostly limited to grading, drainage, and stormwater protection, and not the building design itself.
Right.
One last suggestion, question, and then I'm done. I would really like VTrans to consider some type of infrastructure for recording complaints and providing the town with a list. I don't think it has to be anything more complicated than somebody making some entries in an Excel spreadsheet that could be shared. So I understand nothing exists right now for that, but I would really like you to consider implementing something so that the board could have something a couple of times a year that gives us a sense of the type of complaints and how often they're made and regarding what, like Brian mentioned, it's difficult for this governing body to help and participate and, support our taxpayers if we don't know the type of complaints that are going, that are being made. So,
Or how they've been resolved,
yeah.
if at all.
Yeah. So if you would please consider making some changes there so that we could see something from the state, that would be
Sure.
appreciated.
And I can reach back out, Heather, and specifically address that request, and for how VTrans can approach something like that.
Okay, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. I won't talk anymore.
Come on.
The only thing I wanted to add was,
you know, and I know everyone here already knows this, but, you know, you made it a point of pointing out that this is the second smallest airport in the state, but it's also the airport with the most neighbors within a half-mile radius, and maybe within a mile radius. So, you know, as Heather's saying, it's been really hard for us to navigate all the different concerns. You know, it's been a bit of a mess and we've been trying to figure out the best way to facilitate good communication, you know, and being responsive to our neighbors. So I really think it would be beneficial for VTrans to acknowledge that, you know, airports situated in neighborhoods might need a little more attention written into the process. And I know there's the TAC, you know, I'm not, but yeah, I guess that was it. Something
Back to that,
something more formal.
yeah, back to that complaint infrastructure piece, you know, like Lindsay's saying, recognition that this airport is situated in a populated area and does maybe need something more than others.
I'll just give you an example. I'm aware of separate privilege complaints as well, so it go both ways. And targeted towards the businesses when the business wasn't even functioning on a Sunday. And of course, business, because everybody knows the business is there, gets targeted. So I think it would give us a better idea of what's going on, and maybe sometimes it might be necessary to do a block party at the airport or something, you know, what, to get everybody there to just see what's going on and understand, especially new neighbors who maybe don't even understand the businesses that are there. But you don't know that you got new neighbors until all of a sudden you get all these complaints that are loud. We saw it certainly during COVID, you know, it was a great changeover, and so you're going through the process of, at some level, of educating a whole new group of neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I think they kind of all tie together a little bit in the last three of those. And I just wanted to articulate just some of the complications VTrans is against with addressing some of the potential comments and concerns. And that 90% federal funding comes with a lot of strings and how to handle that. And so there's a financing of how to do projects that they are then struggle with to meet both ends. And so if there was, and I'm happy to, like I said, that's an action item for me to get back to you specific about that reporting process. But just to explain that it's not as easy to complete a project, perhaps something that someone might want, if there is no federal funding for it. And that then becomes entirely state funded when they can get only, they're only 10% share normally. So I just wanted to just say that.
I think we're as cognizant of that as anybody. We have any downtown.
Right, I have just trying to understand and make a point here, I think. If a hangar is proposed or a building, a terminal or anything inside that airport area, what input does the town of Middlebury have? Oversight, permitting, anything? What do we have involvement in anything developed in that airport site?
The Act 250.
Act 250.
Party status.
Yeah, party status. Okay.
So, as a new person and a young person trying to wrap my head around so much infrastructure, can you walk me through what the Act 250 process would look like? Like is that I get it. I get
another
it.
meeting.
But is that like our DRB? Is that coming to a select board meeting? Is that like
That's very, very involved. It looks at all the criteria that impact environmentally, noise, traffic, schools, It's a very thorough review. Every state agency has input to it. You think this is putting it under the microscope, it's much more
Gotcha.
involved.
Thank you.
It has its own Wikipedia page, if that.
Oh,
It does.
Oh, this is
And I just
Good
got
place to
my-
start.
I just got my new 2023 Bible.
It's quite a process.
wow.
Overwhelming.
It's so much of a process that that's part of the statewide permitting effort is to help folks who want to build maybe a hangar and cannot go through such a process because it's so intense.
It's also that Vermont state-owned airports are somewhat unique in that the state owns and operates the facility, but they won't buy and build hangars. They have to be done privately. So the private entity has to come in and get the permits normally, but the private entity can't apply for the permit for building on state property. It sort of becomes a catch-22. And that was one of the components of why the state, not just at Middlebury, I don't want to single Middlebury out, that started the program to a new approach. It was a new approach, and they're working out the bugs.
Now, I do believe because they are private hangars that they still go through our PRB process of the town.
Are you good? I don't know the answer to that.
I know that because it's on state land, there is some difference. But I would have to get back to you on that.
No, that was my question.
I had one clarifying question because I am aware of some of the complaints that, and I'm curious on the PAPI. When does a pilot pick up the PAPI to correct their altitude? How far out?
They're designed to be seen at least 4 miles away.
So well before they hit over the top of East Middlebury.
Yes.
It's one of the-
4 miles.
We get complaints of planes too low over East Middlebury. That would hold them up and into the glide path better.
You can only see this in the end of the runway. I mean, you got to be aligned to the runway. So what, if they're coming from multiple approaches in there, which from multiple angles, it's only aligned in the runway. So you got to be in the cone. They're licensed. Pardon?
I'm a little off.
If you're operating in a standard traffic pattern where
Right.
where you come in on a downwind leg, they would call it, and then you turn perpendicular to the runway, and then a final approach for the last mile or so. When you're making that turn to that last mile, that's when you'll start to see the lights, the PAPI lights. But if you're 20 miles away and you're lined up with the runway, not if you won't see anything perpendicular, but if you're lined up with the runway, you'll see those PAPI lights on a clear day for several miles away if the sun's not in your eyes. At night, you can see them for 20 miles, but they'll be off at night in this case.
So it could contribute to moderating the number of pilots that are approaching too low over East Middlebury.
Pilots are required to follow flight procedure and regulations. And one of the regulations is that you may not approach an airport below the glide path established by the PAPI. So if you're seeing 2 red lights, the pilot's required, and there's no control tower, but the pilot's required to get up to the approach that's appropriate and determined by the PAPI.
We also talked about the GPS approach. The flight procedures would be changed, so that would also be a guidance for aircraft to take the right federally required approach procedure to the airport for landing operations.
Okay. Is there anything else from this? Any questions from the audience? I'm going to allow everybody one question. That's it. You got one. Yes. Everybody, when we call on you, state your name for the record.
You want them to come up here?
If you could come up over here, that would be,
I want to go there.
okay. Speak loudly.
I'm Richard McCurr, and I live here. Live up here. But my question is there anybody if V-Trans or in your consulting group or any conceivable location who would welcome, if they lived here and had a beautiful view of the Green Mountains, would welcome a 30-foot tall building with lights on it directly in their line of sight? That's my question. Anybody at all want to have a building there? Hands, anything? No.
I had that happen with a townhouse. Built a townhouse. They put lights in the back. Commercial construction.
Sorry, what did you say?
I'm just saying, I had a townhouse and they came along and built a industrial complex behind it with lights. It was irritating, yes.
Well, it's really the view that gets completely.
No, I understand.
At
I
any
understand.
time.
I
There
understand.
wasn't a view. Yeah. There wasn't a view before that house was there. The house, the person that built the house cut the trees all down, which weren't on his property. Aren't part of that.
This is today,
This is 20 years ago.
This is today.
Talk about now.
and let's talk about now.
Well, the airport's been there since 1950. Right.
Enough said. My name is Peter Brown, and as he said, the airport's been there since 1950. But I wanted to touch on one topic that you guys had already discussed about blind path. A glide path is, I believe, 3 degrees. Most people in the surrounding area have no idea where 3 degrees puts them there, perhaps above their house. So they'll look up and their first response is that plane's too low, not knowing that it is on a glide path. So if you come in over from Lake Dunmore, straight in approach to runway 1, you might find that that aircraft appears to be too low. It's on the glide path as established by the FAA since 1950.
And that could very well be the case. I know I always think I'm closer to the green than I am. Next.
I didn't have a question for you, but I did want to address the board.
What's your name?
My name is Susan Shasha. I should know that from town meeting. I looked at your letter from January 17th, and when you talked about protection of environmental resources, and I wanted to give you some more specific language to make your request for what you're looking for. I think it's important for you to understand that the state, not V-Trans, a different state entity that you spoke of before, issues the operating permits for water systems, and that they require source protection plans to be submitted regularly as part of that review process. I think Middlebury's due to submit their source protection plan in September 15th of this year. East Middlebury just had their deadline in December. And it's very appropriate to ask for V-Trans to provide specific information that our water systems need in order to maintain compliance with the state and federal regulations, especially from Middlebury, is applying for all this state and federal grants to have a permit that is clear of all red flags is a really good thing. So I wanted to give you some language to think about, is that it's good to ask V-Trans to review and update the following yearly: the airport's best management practices, their spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plans, and their hazardous spill response procedures. They can then forward the updates to Middlebury and East Middlebury water systems to be filed in their respective source protection plans. It's basic information that the town needs in order to report to the state. It's only fair to have V-Trans provide that information without the town having to ask for it. Do you have any questions?
Can you shoot me that in an email?
Everything I said,
You wrote it.
I wrote it out.
Perfect.
positive friendship. Do you have any questions about, I'm not sure if you have any questions either.
I don't have questions. We will review it in writing.
It's a great thing to have as part of the Act 250 process, that you've already asked for that information ahead of time. Okay?
Thank you, Susan.
Next.
Wes Conrad. Are the pappy lights facing both directions?
The PAPI lights don't exist yet. If they were installed, there would be the units potentially installed for the north end facing north, and that would be for aircraft landing from the north, and would also be done a completely different system on the south end.
So there'd actually be two sets of pappy.
That's right. And on this standard, this is not to scale, they're not as big as shown here. But here's a 2-box PAPI unit, FAA calls it. It would be facing in this direction and visible for aircraft coming in this direction. From the north end, the opposite would be the case, and here's the potential PAPI units there.
Yeah, I only saw the ones on the north. And so you say they're off at night, but what's to prevent someone with access to the airport from just using them at night, turning them on so they can be used? I mean, what is?
We're getting ahead of ourselves because it's just in the plan, nothing's designed yet. But they would have to be most likely on a photocell that would turn them when, instead of, photocell often turns lights on when it gets dark. The photocell will be reversed and turn them off when it gets dark. Could a pilot go in and, I don't know, I never heard of that. So.
It's also would be federally funded for 90%. And so that's an FAA piece of equipment. And I don't know the specific language about what it means for someone to turn off a piece of equipment, but there are certainly provisions that is not acceptable. If the FAA allowed anyone to turn off safety equipment at airports, that could cause a serious issue.
And the PAPI lights, it's a visual aid. It's not it uses a light, but it's a visual aid. It's not a nighttime lighting device. It's like a traffic light that's on 24/7. But if a road closes at night, you don't need to pay the bill to have the traffic light on. So to have nighttime activity, you have to add runway lights, and that's what's not in the plan. The runway lights are a series of lights every 200 feet down the runway, and that outlines where the pavement is. If you had these PAPI units, it wouldn't tell you anything about where the pavement is to touch down. It would just tell you if you're too high or too low.
So if these were installed, it doesn't mean that somebody can land a plane there at nighttime if somebody left the light on.
We do have a hand by Judy, just to keep that in mind.
So Brian, I'm gonna ask for some flexibility here. Can I make a couple of comments and then ask a question?
As long as we're not meandering one feet out.
Do I meander, Brian?
Is that before, yes?
Thank you. I won't meander. I wanted to clarify, you mentioned, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, and you're Paul.
Robert.
Robert. Thanks, Robert. You mentioned earlier that you'd seen a plan, the previous ALP included development in that area in the north end. Can you show that? Do you have that handy? That's pretty late. Right, so could you point to, by looking at that, could you point to exactly where the development is? So if I said
would I be correct in saying that building was shown and then there's a twin building here? So none of this area was on the previous ALP,
So
correct?
the FAA looks at the new buildings in an area, and that's considered from the multitude of different configurations. So one building with a whole bunch of stalls in it versus several buildings, it's a configuration difference.
What I'm asking is, can you hold that up a minute? This area in shaded here is equivalent to this area here, correct? So none of this from here
is shown.
Okay. New, correct?
What is it? What is the date on that plan?
2003, signed and approved 2005.
It's important
Thank you.
because when Andrew and I moved
Thank
Send it to you.
to Middlebury, we did our due diligence because obviously we knew we were living on Airport Road. So we suspected and guessed that there was an airport around there. And indeed there is. But we looked at that. I actually looked at that map. And to satisfy me that actually worst comes to the worst, we're not going to get a 30-foot by 120 by 120 building in front of our home. So we did our due diligence. And now it seems that the rules have changed a little bit. So that's why we're a little sensitive to that. So that's my comment. You also mentioned the revenue generation of the hangars and how important that is for federal revenue. Do you know how much the current existing configuration of hangars generate for the airport?
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Do you have a guess?
I wouldn't want to guess, no. I don't know.
It's about, for every airport, so every hangar on there, so all the yellow hangars, it generates about $20,000 a year. So the initiative to do the master permitting has cost about $1 million. I think. So if it's revenue generating, it doesn't seem to be so successful. And indeed, the tie downs, and you see the area in gray where the tie downs are. I think, Paul, you saw, how many planes did you see at the tie down when you visited that time, do you think?
I visited many times. The last time I was there, I counted 13.
13.
At a tie down, at that one tie down area.
Right. Would it surprise you if only 3 of them paid tie down rentals?
I'm going to listen to your comments. I don't have your financial answer.
Yeah, so only 3 of the tie downs, actually planes on the tie down, have ever paid any lease payments. So it just, when it's a revenue generating reason, I find it hard to believe that actually. Now to my question, I guess, is if the, and I think I may have asked this before, forgive me if I have, but I think in a previous meeting, all right, let me ask you the question. If the north side hangars had not been required in your RFP for the master plan, so V-Trans said you have to include those. This is a requirement in the master plan. So don't do any due diligence. Just put them in the master plan. Would you have, based upon the projections of the planes and what you expect the airport to become, would you have actually proposed those in the north side, those hangar configuration, or even or any of those hangars?
I would have definitely proposed hangars in that spot. I would have gone to the previous plan to start with, saw there were hangars there.
Well,
I would have reviewed locations for hangars, and similar to what you see on that plan, we would have recommended locating optional positions for hangars all across the north and south of the zip. We would have done that. Now, I do want to point out that there are 9 aircraft hangars there, and that's the point you're making, is that's more than in 2005. Those are options. Those don't mean the 9 hangars are going to be built. I would be very surprised if there's enough tenants to afford those hangars. But I know that you have moved there now, and I perfectly understand your position.
There seems to be a disconnect between the numbers you project in terms of, I forgot what, it goes up to 42, correct?
There, 39.
39.
There are, on this plan, there is definitely more capacity than for 9. I know that's, you can't tell from that because it depends on how they design the hangars and how they lay them out and they're post-free.
What's the range?
But there is, with the 9 aircraft hangars, just from those there, there's probably, depending on the type of airplane, maybe a capacity from between 10 and 20. And that's why I feel those 9 hangars aren't all going to be built. They're options for future tenants to consider. And that's the whole idea of the master permitting, is to foster the ability to provide hangars of various sizes, various locations, and various needs. So that's why it was done.
But almost twice the capacity to what you think it's going to be.
And those aren't the only hangars on this. So there's clearly more hangars shown on this plan on purpose than for just 9 additional aircraft. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Hanf, Green Mountain Avionics. I just wanted to briefly thank the board for the support on behalf of my business at the airport and the other people that are employed at the airport. And kudos to all the hard work and good information that the state has hired the consultants. I think it's very well put together, very informed, and it is good to have a plan to move forward. I'll keep it brief. Thank you.
So should I get Judy?
Better get Judy before I forget her.
That would not go over big.
Sorry, Judy, I see you. I just can't get to you.
Trying to get Judy first. You go ahead and get her first.
No, you might as well go ahead with it while I,
Was there anybody else?
there wasn't anybody else there.
Go ahead. Okay, yeah. My name's Eugene Ruick. I live at the south end of the runway on the east side of the road. I think you guys know roughly where I'm at. The biggest question I had was that hangar that you said pre-permitted. And every time I've asked other people about it, it's nothing that's planned yet.
Which one, the southern one?
This is the southern one. Pre-permitted might not be the best term, but yeah, we'll talk about that.
That's more that, yeah. So has it gone through all the steps?
No.
It's clearly not done.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the process of going through the steps. So they need to have all their permits in hand before they can go and get the Act 250 permit. We're working with them on their process, and I can't anticipate how long it will take. It's an ongoing effort. They still have many permits they still have to get and reviews that we're going to be working with them on. And truthfully, we hope to be meeting with them shortly to discuss some of the additional effort that's needed.
Okay, and when they're doing the abutting and on our people like myself at the end there, because it is done at that end, am I included in a lot of these discussions?
Yeah, in the Act 250 application, there's an abutters list of notification for the Act 250 process. And so when we do apply for Act 250, there will be an outreach notification.
Okay, because we've talked about this quite a bit, and even the select board didn't know much about that word call.
Yeah, I guess it was not the best choice of words because it's hard to, I guess.
It insinuates that it's going through permits here, and I think that's what people are expecting, and they're looking, where's that permit?
I'll take the responsibility for that. It was a hangar site and layout that wasn't identified by the consultants. It was pre-identified by someone else. It shouldn't have said permitting. It's permitting. The way it's written, it implies the permit is done, which is not the case. It is misleading. I'll take the blame on that.
Yeah, so,
Because I remember talking to Brian and we sent him
Yeah.
and a
Yes.
few other people, and
Yes.
no one knew about it, and it's been always on that picture.
a better word would be private development hangar permitting effort. That,
Yeah, that's probably.
but it's a little bit longer of a word.
Like I said, when you see the.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
And then you go to Act 250 and
Right.
there are a
Right.
couple that were permitted,
It's a good point.
that you're wondering, well, where
Right.
does this go? So I think it did cause some confusion amongst all of
Yeah.
us.
And I've been trying to use the statewide permitting effort to describe what we're doing in the northern section as the delineation from what's being shown in the southern section. And so they're in their process. They have not applied for Act 250 yet.
Well, no. Based on your comment, and a few others on the same comment, we've already changed it in the final that we're still working on. But what I brought up was the draft. So we have that comment, and you won't show it labeled that way in the final document.
And I've spoken to you guys already about what was done.
Yes.
We've been there 45 years. I built my house 45 years ago when, you don't have a picture, but it was just the very center part where the airport buildings are. Yeah, pictures are gone right now. Right?
The,
Yeah.
Is it possible to turn the?
Yeah, yeah.
Just imagine we were back to that picture.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, Judy is ready.
Yeah, so back when we built the house, the only thing that was there is the blue right in the middle where the main buildings are.
Further north, yeah.
That was that.
Sure.
So whenever, in front of my house, back, 30-some years ago, there was a lot more dirt there, it was topsoil. And I already brought this up to you guys at the time. And Tom Bowen was the man that was removing it and didn't have a permit or nothing. And it took one phone call to V-Trans, to the state, to stop it right there because it wasn't even supposed to have been done. And that's 20 feet of dirt with trees on top of it.
Was the airport owned by Vermont at that point, or the call was to A&R?
Was it-
The 70s.
I don't have the.
Yeah, no, it would have been owned by Alphonse.
Alphonse.
It would have been, yeah, right.
But then, I thought the state shut it down.
Was A&R might have shut down if they were doing that without a permit.
I don't have that, I'm sure you guys can find, but, when they did that, they took all the trees off the top, which is from my house, with the soil there, with the trees on top of it, you could oversee everything under there. Now with the dirt gone there, because the airport's higher now, and my house at an angle, if that hangar got there, if the dirt was there and the trees was on top, I wouldn't see it. If it got there, I would. So I would like to hear that if anything's gonna happen down there, that there'd be some kind of a protection put up against that. to cover that.
Yep, it's a good question, and I don't have an answer you're gonna like on it. And,
Well, give me a good one.
in front of the board here, get specific on it, between your house and that proposed hangar. The area that they removed dirt and cut down trees used to be high, and now it's a low area. And to create a visual barrier in between there would be an FAA violation, and the state wouldn't fund it to build a new berm or to plant new trees in that location because it's too close to the runway now that the runway is FAA obligated. So there's no option that I could see for the state to come in and do, to put any berm back because of the location. I think the best thing that could be done is whether it was state or yourself is to plant more coniferous trees closer to the road to create a better visual barrier year round.
That's where some of the 20 feet of soil that took off was in that area. And when they bulldozed everything down, they just got the whole picture of it.
Even for a small airport, we have to have a clear area of 250 feet wide. And then beyond that, we have side slopes for airspace protection. And in that area that there once was a berm or a high ground and trees, they would have had to, the trees that would have had to be removed anyway once the V-Trans was operating the airport. And you would never want to put that soil back, even if it was taken out inappropriately back in the 70s. So we have talked about this at V-Trans, and we actually talked about it with FAA. V-Trans went to the FAA and asked about potential funding for some sort of visual barrier. And FAA said, we won't participate in that if it's just a visual barrier for that purpose. They won't fund something like that. So could V-Trans or the state or some other entity, plant more coniferous trees closer to the road, not close to the runway?
Right, and put some of that dirt back in there, that trees, trees don't have to be big trees, would be, there's 20 feet of dirt that's sticking out of there back then. That's a lot.
I can't see the dirt going back in there.
No,
You would have to go
so-
through the whole Act 250 and stormwater permitting process to put the dirt that used to be there back.
Better than finding another place for the hair. And put maybe a runout point there, when the business says when the airplane sit down there and you rev up the engine for taking off, and that works. That's a lot of places.
Sticking with the one comment, I could see as part of the permitting process for that hangar, if it does move forward and gets through the Act 250 permit, that a visual barrier should be a comment that could be included in the permitting process. I can't say it would be, but because V-Trans or me as an airport planner, we say that any reasonable places for hangars should be considered. In the permitting process, if there's a mitigation that is appropriate, that the permitting agencies will make that call. You were also mentioning like a noise barrier for engine runs. We talked about that as well. And this for the board, this was a comment that aircraft before takeoff test their engines. They run up at higher RPMs when they're on the ground to check everything. What we've suggested to V-Trans is instead of doing those run-ups at the very ends of the runway, not the very ends, the very ends of the taxiway, north and south before takeoff, is that they ask tenants or set up a policy to do their run-ups wherever their hangar is on the taxiway, so that that noise is spread out throughout the taxiway, north and south, and is not concentrated at the very ends of the runway. Your comment that we'll build an enclosure that can.
So that came from some of the businesses there. I don't know nothing about that, makes sense.
We did talk about that at V-Trans and with the FAA. It's not eligible for federal funding, and even more so, FAA would say it's not necessary. The noise isn't great enough to justify that type of mitigation. And FAA doesn't say it doesn't annoy you. It says it's not enough noise on a regular basis to justify any mitigation. Slightly different response to the no answer. But I think that taxiway, spreading the runoffs north and south, would reduce some of the noise. It's not going to take it away.
No, I know the airport's there. If the airport's the way it is right
Eugene?
now.
I think we've defined that this is not part of the master plan that we're talking about tonight, and that this will go through its own Act 250. So I'm going to ask you to yield the floor to the next question.
Yeah, no, all right. We'll keep it on there.
During a permit.
I do appreciate the input, Paul, though, that kind of helped us understand what's been going on.
All right, thank you, guys.
Is Judy on?
She is.
Judy?
Am I on?
You are.
Kathleen, I'm on?
You are on.
Okay. So I have just a couple of comments.
You get one.
One, I'm sorry, Bill?
You get one.
One big one.
No.
Maybe you're done.
So one, I really want to thank the board require careful consideration of what's going on tonight. Two, I want to state to those presenting, I heard the word guesswork. I heard the word not data driven. I heard the word, not being surprised by some of the things that were being heard. I find that unacceptable. Everything that's said here should not be guesswork. It should be data driven, and you should not be surprised by anything. Quickly. The area north of Munson Road has now been clear cut. Our understanding was that there was going to be a buffer of trees that line the north of Munson Road. Those have now been completely destroyed. The Middlebury Tree Committee cannot keep up with the number of trees that the state takes down. I would propose, as I did to Michelle, that an area of native plants and shrubs be put into that space. There will be no room for terrorist squirrels, chipmunks, or voles to hide out there. And that would be the best use of that so that invasive plants do not come into that area. And lastly, light pollution. Whether it's a single light on a hanger or lights along the runway, that has deleterious effects on wildlife and humans. And so I would suggest the board takes up the following challenge. Keep the light on in your bedroom for the next week. No shades, no blinders, no nothing. And keep the light on. And see how that affects your behavior the next morning. Do it for the week, and I'll check in with you at the next select board meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
I listened to the comment, I don't have a roof.
Brooke Holzhammer. Which came first, the town or the airport? That's not my one question, but I just wanted to bring it up, but it doesn't really matter because we're both here now. And I think that the town, the citizens have done a really amazing job of trying to be good neighbors to the airport. We've witnessed massive clear cuts. We've witnessed degradation of our wetlands. We've witnessed an uprise in risk to our aquifer. We've witnessed the fuel tank that holds leaded fuel degrading and now being temporarily dispensed from a tanker till a new system can be built. And we've all sat back and watched this happen, and we've all been told, well, this growth is imminent, this growth is inevitable, this growth is not based on data, but this growth is coming and we've got to roll out the red carpet for it, and I disagree. And I think that the citizens of this town have really done a great job of trying to be good neighbors to the airport. And the airport and Vermont Trans has systematically just blew us off. We had a fake hotline that was then abandoned for complaints last year after just a few months. Then we had a task force that was set up after a handful of meetings. It disbanded with the promise that we would be getting monthly reports about airport activity. Nothing has been filed since last year. There have been no updates. That includes anything having to do with the giant fuel tanker of ag gas, the leaded fuel used for these single engine planes. No updates since 2022. So that promise was yet again another broken promise to the citizens as far as trying to maintain a healthy relationship with the airport. We've been told just time and time again that our complaints are not enough or don't matter enough to the FAA all this great grant money, I'm sure is really nice when you want $1 million, 15,000 square foot clubhouse. But I'm not sure that the rest of the taxpayers in this town really are feeling the value of that 90% federal funding. And I really think that it lays in the lap of the airport and Vermont Trans to convince us otherwise. That has not been done. And every attempt that's been made to make it seem like we're being good neighbors have been false, have fallen through over and over and over again. So why should we trust that this time we've got Act 78 that we now know pretty much tells us that all of these noise complaints are just going to the FAA and then being ignored. They have, because of the grants, they have control over all of that and they don't do anything. They don't care. They don't live here. I guess I don't really have much of I wish I were posing this as a question. I wish I could be optimistic enough I was going to get an answer. But everything that's been laid out so far for us have been, the hotline, the task force, the monthly updates. So I guess that's my question is how are we supposed to continue to be good neighbors to the airport when the airport and Vermont Trans continues to blow us off? And why should we? It's not our $1 million clubhouse. Thank you.
I have one other question that was emailed in, and it's more, I would say, editorial and comment than a question, but it does end with a question. And I promised you I would read it, so they could get the lots of tape and get the response. And it's from Luis Prescott. We have seen the numerous examples of V-Trans and their consultants stepping around specific questions about plans at the airport and its impact on the surrounding neighborhood. Either they don't answer the question at all, or they assign it to the master planning during Act 250 hearings, or vice versa, which is a little ridiculous when it's the same airport, same time frame, and same people in the room. In either case, there's a certain if we build it, they will come approach, but nobody has ever answered the basic question of who's coming or what they're going to do when they get here. Unless we know that, there is no logical way any of us can evaluate the impact on the neighborhood or the local environment. If the answer is unknown, then there can be no justification for risking the local environment, quality of life in the neighborhood, surrounding property values, or by extension, Middlebury's tax base, and spending millions of taxpayer dollars and untold hours of public and private people's time on this. So our question is, please tell us if you build it, who's coming, and what are they going to do when they get here?
Yeah, I will answer that as best I can. The master plan mostly is status quo from an airfield standpoint, other than safety improvements with the PAPI and the instrument approaches. If they build it, they will come. I think they're referring to the hangars. I want to answer that by saying V-Trans won't build them. Who they is anyone, if in the future builds a hangar there, the builder is the they. And who they would be companies or private individuals that operate or use aircraft that are small enough to comfortably operate at Middlebury Airport. I can't answer that any better at this point.
Thank you, Paul. Last comment, I think you didn't get a comment.
Nick Argument, I know some of you are sitting there going, what's he doing back? But I heard the Lindahl vote, I was ready to say aye, and I remembered how long I was going, and I wanted to say aye. When you asked me to be a liaison to the board, there was obviously some very vocal concerns, and legitimately. And so the group that's most vocal is the group that refers themselves as not.
Middlebury Airport.
To the point where you actually had put in another person, Eugene Roy, to be their representative, and Eugene did a fantastic job. I'm not sitting in Christie right here, but he did, a lot aided by Prem Prakash and later in Christie. So they did a real good job of gaining the information from that and being able to relay it onward. Now, the thing I learned early on when I came on board is what you all know as well, is that, and I was mentored by some great people, said, remember that you are the board of the community. And there's always more than one side to the story, and it's best to get as many sides as possible. It's not just those who are most vocal, but it's the others. And so then, Mana was well represented, so I went out to find out who were the others to share their stories. And among the things, there were other groups that emerged. Once those neighbors, those residents in that region who are not part of Mana, they were either not invited to be or they chose not to be a part of it. But there are a tremendous amount, and we know a lot of them. They're business people, they're teachers, they're past teachers. And the comment from overwhelmingly them is that the airport's been a good neighbor to us. We knew the airport was here. We built our houses after. Yeah, occasionally we get an air guard helicopter comes in and makes a lot of noise, but that's something we can't control. That's part of the national defense, which is the prime purpose of airports. But we're fine with the airport. And I would say if we look at the number of people who are part of the Mana group, as significant and important as they are, they're a minority. The other part is it's part of Middlebury's economy, just like the industrial park is, just like the Route 7 retail area is, just like the quarries are there just further north of the airport. And so it's also remember that they contribute, that airport has a contribution to the town of Middlebury. Is that significant? That is something the board has to determine. We have to try to present. The third group, or the fourth group, are the businesses that are there. And you heard from Bill, and he was actually pretty low key in his presentation, but what I learned there is he employs 10 people. And these are 10 people who have good skilled jobs. Something that Middlebury has long been looking for is diversified businesses. And what's interesting to look at the demographic is his employees are in the 20 to say 40-year range. They are the people that Vermont has been working hard to retain. As a parent of two professional children who had to leave the area to find work, I'm both admiring what Bill's able to do, and I'll admit a degree of jealousy, because some young folks have been able to stay here where they grew up. So they're providing good employment. As far as growth, when one looks into the history of the airport, I was talking to a gentleman named Jack Downey who Bill acquired some of his properties. Jack one time used to employ 27 people, he told me, and they were bringing in light regional commercial aircraft who were flying regional for the major airlines. So this airport, in fact, has seen a higher level of traffic. What could the airport be? I suspect probably what it has been. Yes, there are private airplanes here, but it's also part of the business community and has some good employment opportunities, which, again, is that something that's important? It's for all of you to decide, but I think the process has been good. I think they've been open, fair. Communications were probably not as good as they could have been early on, but they tremendously grew to the point where even sometimes, and Fahad's concern about not hearing right away, well, that has happened, but I think it's just because of the fact that very busy people, no matter what field they're in, are trying to, they will answer it, but it may take some time. But overall, I think it was a good process. Everything was open, and you got a good product here.
Thanks for serving on the committee. Yes, I think we did hear from Eugene a lot, and I think it gave us a way to feed concerns and comments to the group that was working on it.
Right, can we submit documents to the board, some supplemental documents?
Absolutely, anytime.
Okay, thank you.
If you send them to myself and Kathleen will distribute to the whole board.
Thank you.
Okay, you've taken a lot of your time this evening. I apologize you're so late, but I certainly think it was very valuable. And Rob, I know you're pinch hitting. It's
situation. Lost a good man, but we appreciate you coming and sitting in, and I think you obviously must have been a significant player already anyways, because you seem to know a lot about what's going on there. So appreciate both of your time.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As far as the board comments, the slight mirroring exactly. I would propose that we consider the comments on, that say Susan. Because I think those are things that we have to have an SPCC. We have to have those things. Have them share with us. Some are asking that they share those documents that they have to prepare anyway.
Oh, yeah. An 80-foot pine tree.
And if it makes our staff.
The height of that pine tree. Right, I mean, you have to turn right off this runway side.
They might just verify,
It was a
know
buzzer.
who will know.
It looked like an old, I saw, I heard. Yeah, it looked like an older plane, but it wasn't really long.
Emily?
Emily. Just to verify, maybe we should do.
Sure.
Any other requests?
I'm very.
Well, the request that Heather brought up about, please try to compile complaints in some way.
Well, that's in our thing already. That really is Act 250, that's all more for the Act 250 is for the state. Although, we should keep it in there, it's a concern.
Once they go north, I don't hear.
Okay. Anybody learn a lot on that?
A bit.
Sounded very low, like they gave 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Only this was a lot more control and better questions.
Yeah. It hasn't changed really significantly from one of the, I attended one of the hearings, so I don't see much concern personally. Regardless of the master plan, somebody could propose hangar developments at any time there for any kind of configuration in any place that they wanted, and regardless of what the master plan said, and it would go through the permitting process and we wouldn't really have much say in it, you know? And just like you own a piece of property next to another neighbor, they have the right to develop that property and go through the permitting process and make requests to and as a neighbor, you don't really, I mean, you can comment on that, but
Not going to take into consideration
Yeah.
whether it's
right.
screening or something. Okay.
But anyway,
Appreciate everybody's comments and questions. One last thing before we go into check warrants is the preparing for next week's retreat. I think it was what, four or five in a row. Yeah. Crack that whip. So, has everybody looked at Kathleen's kind of layout? Is there any issues that you make sure get queued up? What are your top couple?
One thing that I would say is, when we're looking at the EDI site and the Bakery Lane, it's related to that, to think about the master plan implementation process a little more broadly, and to make sure that we've got a good communication with planning about what's going on there, what we can expect, where the activity is around these priorities.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, you. Can you just clarify what you just said?
Just master planning follow-ups, just set a cadence and expectations on hearing back from staff about what's going on.
Are you proposing a new item?
I suggested it's related to the EDI, which is a master planning objective, but it is perhaps a new item.
Okay.
We're gonna need a new meeting.
We really need like at least. So what do people want to talk about next week?
One thing I'd like to know for all of our, ease of how we move forward is that first and foremost, I'd like to talk about the library, your thoughts on how we pay for that, and if it's through something like EDI, what level you support. This may be all we have time for, frankly. What level you support and what process you'd like to see that go through.
So you're proposing that the retreat be about the library?
Well,
And the EDI site.
that's a prime topic. I think we've got three big topics that are before us. Two of those are kind of working down the path. The childcare, there's really not a tremendous amount of play on our part on that. I think there's a potential for play and participation on our part for the housing piece. And the housing can be more than strictly the Seminary Street project. So we can talk about that. But then, the library, does anybody have the desire or taste to just put out a bond without having a payment solution and just do it in taxes? I know there are some that do. I don't. I don't, okay. But I know I've been asked, and I don't think that that's responsible on our part, but I think we need to talk about that.
We do.
And make sure that we're all on the same, that we don't all have to agree, we have to agree on at least what's the majority choice.
Mhm.
I think differences should be raised, and should discuss them, and decide what our path collaboratively is gonna be.
Mhm.
Because we're gonna have lots of pressure to put the foot on the gas, which means start spending money. And some of the times I think, without getting into our retreat, I think sometimes you need to make sure you know where you're going before you spend too much money. So it may not push you forward.
I think it'd be great.
Only item we're talking about, or-
Well, I think we ought to have several items teed up, and if we don't get it, so.
So you're thinking of the EDI site as a potential way of helping to fund the
I
library?
am, and I did send a letter lobbying to try to get support from the state legislature. At this point, it didn't make crossover, but there's a chance it's going to get tied into a bill. But there's, and frankly, I was hoping that we could get some support from our own senators on pushing that, because they know what we want to use it for.
Mm-hmm.
One senator sits on it.
Which is why I was really hoping that we get some push. Yeah.
Is there a reason this two item highlighted in here?
You'll see that.
Something
Those were added since last time.
just added? Okay, I thought those were made.
The highlighted ones in the packet, I think, were things that we kind of talked about at the last meeting.
Okay.
You know, as, and it may have been things that I brought up at the last meeting, just to clarify. You know, I mentioned being curious what priorities other members had, and
Is there anything that anybody specifically wants? If not, I'll tee it up with Kathleen and we'll start the meeting.
We have more than enough to talk about in 4 weeks.
Around housing, it doesn't have to be this meeting, but I think we should think about how we can encourage development in that other site near the police station.
I stopped in to talk with Jen briefly about it,
Mhm.
and we bounced some ideas around
Mhm.
on that. I think that's the type of thing where we need to know, does the board want to do that? In which case, I think it's, at some point, we need to reach out to some of those neighboring property owners and see if they really want to participate on not a private, but a town basis, that, you know, I'm here as a position in the town, whether it's planning or, you know, myself or yourself or whoever, saying, we've talked about this area, would you support that? And try to see if there's support among some of those neighbors, because a little bit of extra property would really help that. And there are a couple of properties there.
Okay.
As far as helping the capacity.
Yep. No, I was wondering where you.
Where I was.
Yeah.
No, looked at it with Jen briefly. That,
Okay.
okay, well, we'll do that. If something crops up, shoot me a note. This is a little different because this is our meeting. Public meeting, but usually nobody dials in.
Yeah.
Check warrants.
I have done the check review just now, there's one check I do.
The check, single check review.
I moved to approve expenditures in the amount of $40,522 for accounts payable for the period of March 15th to March 21st, 2023. Come on, second.
Second.
some of us are sleeping over there.
Board member concerns.
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah?
I'm good.
The high school play, Madagascar,
Mhm.
so good.
Oh, right.
Yeah, kudos to all that participated. Yeah, it was Thursday, Friday, and 2 on Saturday.
Nice.
Got nothing.
I just want to say, you were much better in your presentation of the request for the complaints that I was not to mention, that you just FOIA them and get a
Just
little
what?
aggressive. FOIA, freedom of information.
Oh.
And make them scramble, put everything together and just make it into a real big hassle for everyone.
It's not these guys.
Yeah, but V-Trans would have to do it because, you know, that's.
Dirty ball.
It is dirty ball. No, but Heather's approach is much better. I'm glad you said that.
So
We'll see if anything happens.
I don't.
You have to remember, because sometimes a little bit of sugar will get you a lot further down the path.
Yeah, right.
That's the way I operate.
We need their support on a lot of
Sure.
stuff. Okay.
Appreciate balls.
I appreciate everybody's sticking with us this month to get through it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Not even gonna ask.
What happened to the monthly updates? They really did publish 2 monthly updates and then it.
Well, yeah, there was some issue because it became a problem with the matter.
Yeah,
And,
they shoot themselves in the foot
because
a
it-
lot.
because then they got